Good morning. Mr. President, Jacob Zuma, distinguished heads of state, heads of government, excellencies, dear participants. It's a great pleasure to welcome you officially to the 27th Africa Summit of the World Economic Forum. We are here a true multi-stakeholder assembly, and I welcome the representatives of many governments who have joined us here. I welcome particularly our partners and members who have been so loyal since so many years and have worked together with us to address the specific issues of Africa. But I welcome also the representatives of civil society, a very important pillar of what we are doing. And particularly, I welcome the young generation. You are the future of Africa, and you have to be engaged in everything which we are doing. And finally, a cordial welcome to the social entrepreneurs. Preceding this summit, we had a meeting of 200 social entrepreneurs over the last 2 days. And I can assure you, those are role models for all of us, improving the lives of hundreds of millions of people through their entrepreneurial and innovative spirit. It's always with a certain passion when I'm here and opening the summit for the 27th time. I remember when I came first to this country in 1990 and met Nelson Mandela. I remember my many discussions with him, and we talked once about the branding for Africa. Is it the country of hope? Is it the continent with a heart and with a soul? Is it the continent of the young generation? And if we look back, tremendous progress has been made. But today, certain people would also say it has become a continent of concern. And I think if we look at these concerns, they have to be placed in the framework of what's happening in the world. But before elaborating 3 global challenges and possible impact on Africa, I just would like to say, your presence here, the fact that there were commitments for millions of dollars of investment, show the engagement you want to take all in making this continent prosper, in making it a continent for the future. Now, if I look at the global challenges, the first challenge which we have to confront and which offers many opportunities but also threats, is the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution will change in fundamental ways how we produce, how we consume, how we communicate, and how we live. It's a combination of digital breakthroughs combined with what's happening in the material fields, in biology, and I could go on and on. When I wrote my book 18 months ago, I listed a number of technologies, and many people at that time said, this is science fiction. And today, it's already reality. Just think of self-driving cars and so on. So, the fourth industrial revolution will hit us with the force of a tsunami. And I would argue that the dividing line of the future is not anymore between left and right. It is between those who embrace the future, embrace the new opportunities, embrace openness, and those who look back, who struggle in the present. It's very interesting. If you look at future preparedness, I noticed that in Korea at the moment, in the presidential election campaign, there are 4 candidates. And the question is, who is most prepared for the future? Who is most embracing the fourth industrial revolution? I would like to have the same situation for Africa. And Africa has an enormous chance to leapfrog because it has a young population. And the young, as we all know, are eager to embrace change, to exploit entrepreneurial opportunities. But we have to provide them with the necessary ecosystem, which comprises particularly education, upskilling, reskilling, and I would even say mass entrepreneurialism. There's another issue which is important. If we look at the future and the context of the fourth industrial revolution, countries which are absorbed by internal conflicts use unnecessarily energy to prepare the future. And I would even say, the more consensual a society is, the more it will prosper in the future because it can concentrate on exploiting the opportunity which are offered by the future. The second big global challenge we have to confront is what people call the new normal. We will have not anymore the fast-growing economy which we saw before the crisis, when we doubled global GDP every 15 years. We rather will have a growth rate, even if it looks better for this next year, globally around 3, maybe a little bit more, which means to double GDP only every 25 years. And thus leaves us with an enormous issue: how to solve the unemployment problem of the young generation, particularly in a continent where in 2030 1/4 of young people will live in Africa. So everything has to be done to ensure a growing economy. Economic growth which is, of course, inclusive, but which is sustainable. And the key here is the trust into the future. How can we generate trust? What does it need to have trust? Of course, we all know about the potential of Africa, but it needs more. It needs trust in the soundness of the institutional system. It needs trust in democracy. And democracy means not only elections, it means also accountability. The last item I want to stress. We have everywhere in the world a crisis of leadership. Why? People feel that they are living in precarious situations, that the present situation cannot be maintained. They expect fast solutions for complicated problems. And of course, there are many populists who exploit this situation. But at the end, I think we can create a prosperous and peaceful world if we come back to value-based leadership. And if I look, I'm asked very often, Mr. Schwab, you have met every leader in the world in the last 30, 40 years. What is actually the essence of leadership? And here, I usually refer to Madiba, to Nelson Mandela, because he incorporated those three values. First, respect human dignity and diversity. Second, serve the community you belong to more than your self-interests. And number three, be a trustee for the future generation. And this leads us to the theme of our annual meeting here, inclusiveness and responsive and responsible leadership. Responsive means that we are truly aware of the needs of those who have entrusted us with leadership. Responsible means that we project the values which provide us with trust. Thank you. And I have now the great pleasure to introduce the President of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Zuma.
Thank you very much, Professor. Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished delegates and special guests, good morning to you all. Thank you, Professor Schwab, for your opening remarks. It is always a pleasure and honor for South Africa to host the Africa meeting of the World Economic Forum on behalf of Africa. Let me thank the heads of states and government and indeed, Your Majesty, the King of Swaziland, who have taken time off their busy schedule to travel to South Africa to attend this important gathering. We are truly pleased to host all the delegates who are here. This forum meeting takes place under an important theme which emphasizes inclusive growth. This presents an opportunity to discuss vigorously the various issues of economic growth and development, mindful of the fact that opportunities from that growth must not be enjoyed only by a few. The global context has evolved since the last we met in Cape Town in 2015. In the past 2 years, we have seen a drop in commodity prices, which affected a number of economies in Africa. We have also witnessed an increase in social discontent among citizens globally due to increasing alienation and exclusion. The theme for this year's World Economic Forum on Africa is therefore most relevant to the challenges facing the world. Excellencies, delegates, other critical challenges facing the world include weak economic growth, the management of migration, global security and terrorism, as well as related international crimes. The youth, in particular, have been very clear in calling for leaders to address issues of exclusion, inequality, poverty, and unemployment. They are an important stakeholder for us because Africa is a youthful continent, which means we are a continent that has a very bright future if we invest correctly in our young people. Importantly, as leaders, we have not addressed adequately how we are going to close the gap between the rich and the poor in the world and achieve meaningful, inclusive growth. The gap between the developed and developing worlds, or North and South, remains huge, while the gap between rich and poor in many countries also remains wide. We grappled with this theme of unabating inequality in Davos a few years ago. We are pleased that this week some of these issues will be discussed by global leaders at this forum. We support the G20 resolution of 2016 that a people-centered sustainable development must be achieved, which ensures that no one is left behind and that the dignity of every person on the planet is protected. This can only be achieved if each country is allowed to grow its economy based on its unique features without imposing conditions. Also important, as decision makers discuss this week, is for all to commit to the advancement of a just world order, as outlined in the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. In working towards facilitating inclusive growth and prosperity, the continent has a number of issues to resolve, which we are already addressing and which are in line with the Continental Blueprint Agenda 2063. In our country, we speak about radical economic transformation, which in our view will take us on the path to inclusive growth and a better life for all. Moves are already underway to radically transform the African economy. Infrastructure development remains top of the agenda to ease the movement of goods, people, and services across Africa. Also critical is the work that is being done to promote regional integration and intra-Africa trade. In our region, the SADC, we have decided to prioritize industrialization, especially through labor-intensive manufacturing, to promote job creation. Other focus areas include agriculture in order to improve food security and also to begin to derive more value from the ocean through boosting the ocean's economy. These are areas that many investors would find lucrative on the African continent. For Africa to succeed in taking these programs forward, we need to mobilize appropriate financing. Accordingly, we must invest in developing local capital markets and mobilize domestic resources through taxation and other means. More importantly, one of the most important actions that are critical for Africa is sourcing finance, is to arrest illicit financial flows. Billions are taken out of Africa each year, and this is money that should be used to fund our development. We are encouraged by the work done by the Financial Action Task Force. One of the recommendations of the task force is the countries should identify, assess, and understand the money laundering and terrorist financing risk for the country, and that countries should take action. This is of absolute importance. However, while much has been done globally to fight terrorism financing, the proliferation of illegal weapons and money laundering, not much has been done to fight profit-shifting, tax crimes, and other related economic crimes. We wish to emphasize, therefore, that combating the illicit financial flows, transfer pricing, and other related international financial crimes is critical to the attainment of global sustainable development. These matters should be taken seriously by global decision makers as part of the move towards a just world order and inclusive growth. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, another radical step that we must take as African countries is to diversify our economies away from dependence on commodities so that they become less vulnerable to commodity shocks. We also need to step up investment in both social and economic infrastructure, improving the quality of life of our people through social infrastructure such as building hospitals and schools that will improve the quality of life. In order to achieve these goals and many others, we need to strengthen developmental partnerships between government, business, labor, and all relevant stakeholders. This forum is a key instrument in this regard, as it brings global actors together to discuss such important matters. It is also important for such discussions among social partners to continue taking place domestically, which has been an important area of emphasis for South Africa. Your Excellencies, as Africans, we have decided to take charge of our destiny. Our people yearn for prosperity, and we are determined not to fail them. That is why we have Agenda 2063 as a clear roadmap towards inclusive growth and a better life. We are acting to propel the rise of the African giant, our continent. Yes, we need to partner with the rest of the world to achieve our radical economic transformation goals. Our partners will find us moving forward with determination and zeal. Africa is rising, and African leaders are rising to the occasion. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me once again extend a warm welcome to all of you in this warm city of Durban. We invite you to explore the city and the rest of the country at the conclusion of the meeting. South Africa remains alive with possibilities and has a lot to offer indeed. I thank you.
The World Economic Forum is a platform for dialogue, so I would like to ask some of you, and I would like to ask particularly the young generation, to ask some questions. But before, I would like to thank you for your speech, for providing us with a framework. I address myself to some of the global shapers, and the global shapers is the World Economic Forum community of leaders between 20 and 30 years old. Who would like to take the floor? Yeah, okay. Can you introduce yourself and where you are from?
Good morning, everybody. Amanda Mate from the Global Shapers, Durban Hub, South Africa. Thank you to our president for addressing us this morning. Thank you, Professor Schwab. Malal, as a leader, how do you begin to engage a youth in terms of skills transferring leadership skills? It's often said that as a youth, we lack the ability to lead. We walk out of university with degrees, ambitious to be managers, ambitious to be CEOs, but we fail to understand leadership skills. In your understanding, what are the ways in which you can transfer your ability to lead to the youth of South Africa?
Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, I think we are aware that in the last 23 years, we have worked on the efforts to skill the youth in many ways, and we've been doing this together, the government, the business, and the labor formations in particular, as well as civil society. The emphasis in our policies has not left the issue of skilling our people, not just the youth, as well as those who are already in the industry, to reskill, but skill those who might have been not skilled before. Because there is a realization that without skills, it would be difficult to grow the economy. I think the interventions that have been made by the economic meltdown, etc., have played their role. But we have tried to deal with this matter. In our country, we have also tried to look at the system, the education system, because in the past, the education system was, in a sense, faulty and distorted, because education was looked at from a racial point of view. Hence, now we can talk about the lack of skills, whilst we have huge numbers. That also influenced the clear identification of important skills, which we've been referring to as scarce skills. Because in the past, the majority of the population was not skilled to deal with the broader kind of economy that we are dealing with now. These are the challenges that we are dealing with, and that's why we have emphasized our work of education. Education is priority number one in our country. That is partly an attempt to address that problem of skills. Because the fact that you have a number of young people who have qualifications or perhaps degrees, but not very difficult to employ, is because those skills were just done education in general, not with a specific plan and specific focus on skills that are necessary for the economy to grow. It was just a question of educating people. And you could have heard more pastors, and yet we need very few pastors, bigger congregations. But because it was not highly planned, you could have more of them. You could have more churches. Of course, it's important to prepare for our future, but we have to deal with the reality here. That has been the difficulty that face us, which talks to our history, but it talks to the challenge that we are faced with today. And that's why the question of skilling has been broadened. And I think we might have also add a little bit when we came in with colleges in terms of the importance of colleges, etc., which we did not emphasize on. The fact that we've got a huge population with not enough tertiary and college kind of places, it talks to our history. So that is what we are trying to address today in many ways. That is why, for an example, rather than just an education department, we created basic education department as well. It's part of addressing that problem to us, that you have young people with qualifications, but not easily employable. But of course, that is also, in a sense, exacerbated by the fact that with the development of the economy and technology, it means it's not just education in general. We've got to deal with very specific things that deals with technology now that the economy is developing in a particular way. That is why, for an example, the matter of us addressing the fourth industrial revolution, to us is a critical one. Because if we've got that backlog, it means we've got bigger challenges. We all have to realize this. We also have to deal with the matter of us, which we are discussing, that the young people who are coming in, waiting and looking for jobs, the private sector, because of technology, demands experience that we did not get necessarily. And the unions are not happy if you say, let us create a bridge between the young one coming in, getting the experience to join the industry, and they feel uncomfortable about it. So these are matters we've got to deal with in real sense. But we have programs in the country that we are saying, how do we absorb the young people who are being qualified every other year? We're discussing, even looking at the statistics of the number of young people who qualify, but the number of jobs that are available. These are matters we're trying to address. And we are very conscious of the fact that we have raised. And we are making a lot of effort to address it.
Mr. President, I know that South Africa is one of the countries with the highest expenditures for education. Now, I'm also very proud that we achieved here some progress, because the World Economic Forum runs a big initiative on the skills for the future. What skills do we really need? And among the 20 very concrete initiatives, action-oriented initiatives is one, how to create the skills for Africa, which we need not today, which we need tomorrow. And I just add one point. When we look at the fourth industrial revolution, I have coined the note, or the saying, the future doesn't belong to capitalism. The future belongs to talentism. Those countries which have the best talents will succeed best in the future. We have time for a second or third question. Who would like to take the floor?
Thank you. My name is Amanda Archibong, and I'm a global shaper from the Abuja Hub. President Zuma, just to ask you, as we have regional hegemons, Nigeria and South Africa, and you rightly mentioned the Agenda 2063. What role do you see our regional hegemons playing in ensuring that we do move to this agenda in a more inclusive way? So Nigeria and South Africa carrying on the rest of the continent. Thank you.
Well, we've been discussing this not just between Nigeria and South Africa only, but from other countries and regions. How do we handle the issue of the pace towards the 2063 agenda? What are we doing as the countries? Of course, there could be the issue between two countries. If we talk about South Africa and Nigeria, we have relations. We have structured relations between the two countries. But I think what we have not done is to deal with the details of what do we do and priorities. What do we do as the two countries to work in such a way that we make the impact in the continent? I don't think we've succeeded to do that sufficiently, so that we are in a position to use the two countries. There has been, between Nigerians and South Africans, an acceptance of the fact that as two countries, we need to do more than what we are doing. Yes, we are developing the relations steadily, but I don't think it is sufficient. That's a matter we need to look at. That's a matter I think the young people have to push us even more to ensure that we are able to deal with these matters, to help us also identify the critical elements of the economy that will make us to move forward. In other words, all of us, we should do so. But the efforts that Africa is doing has been, for an example, as you know, Africa has 5 economic regions. And we've taken very deliberate decisions as the leadership in the continent to integrate these. The 3 of them are in the process very far, integrating, creating a common market, which is absolutely important, opening up more opportunities. We are in the process of discussing to actually integrate the whole 5. I think those are the efforts we are making to say, how do we, by 2063, how do we reach a point we want to have reached by that time? I think there is more prospects now than any other time, because Africans are working together. If we take, for an example, our acceptance and commitment to develop the infrastructure that connects us, that makes the movement of goods and people to be easy in the continent, is a very direct, important element to ensure that we are able to reach 2063 in a particular kind of fashion. We are discussing, for an example, the need to soften the borders so that the movement in Africa should not be difficult. Because this movement, these borders were not necessarily of our creation. This was done by other interests who wanted to separate us. So we've been moving to try to connect one another so that it is easy to move. There are plans even of working on a faster transport in the continent so that you can reach any corner at any given time. I think those efforts talk to the point you are raising. How much do we create the kind of quicker movement towards the agenda we have set for ourselves? I think we are better placed now than any other time before, but we are late. We are late because Africa has always been put in the back burner by the world. We are now saying that's why in my remarks I was talking about us determining our destination, ourselves, our friends, and everybody else to come and partner with us in that process rather than being told what you need to do, what you need not to do, because we believe it is us. And we are therefore banking a great deal on the young people who are being skilled today, who are being technologically trained, that they are going to help us in these very ambitious kind of projects we are putting in the continent. We believe that Africa is well placed today to move even faster than other regions, taking into account the global setting. So we think what we are doing is the right one. We need, of course, a number of things, resources, as well as more working together as a continent. We are ready to do so. There are leaders here from the continent who are part of very important elements economically. The president from Senegal, for an example, leads us in NEPAD, which discusses a lot of these matters. There are heads of states who are heading specific sectors because we wanted to ensure that the political commitment is seen. And I think Africa is in a position that it has never been before in commitment to achieve Agenda 2063.
Mr. President, I think the presence of so many heads of states and government here in this room underline this engagement, this Pan-African engagement. We have maybe time for one short last question. I take someone out of the audience. Yeah.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Daoud Vali. I'm a global shaper from the Maputo Hub, Mozambique. Thank you very much for your remarks, President Zuma and Professor Schwab. Yes, we are late, and we as young people are impatient. My question to you, President Zuma, is how can we make Agenda 2063 closer? Because in 2063, I will be 76. My young daughter will be 46, and that's too far. How can we speed up decision-making process? How can we engage more young people? Because there has been a lot of talk in the past year, yet we are not represented in parliament, we are not represented in governments. When we try to protest peacefully, there is a lot of fear because our governments put the army and tanks on the streets, so we don't go to the streets to peacefully protest, and that's a real concern from where I'm coming from in Mozambique, but I believe also in other African countries. So how can we speed up the process? That's my question.
I like it when you mention the years. When I joined the struggle, I was very young. I was less than 20 years. I'm now 75, just 1 year that you talk about 76. And here I am. I've seen the West, and I've participated to shape it. And I'm now participating in reconstruction. I think it is the determination of the youth that is absolutely important. Not to believe that for us to succeed, it is other people who must do it. The youth itself must participate very seriously to change the future for themselves, together with the elder ones. That's what we have done. And at times, some of us never thought we'd be free at our lifetime. The critical point is that you are able to identify your destination and commitment, and you then work on what is it that, or kind of vehicles and methods and whatever. How then do you shape the future? How do you participate in it? Because you can't say 2063 will be there and you sleep and the following day we are there. It needs us to work harder. I think the relevant part of your question is, what do we do? What is the role that the youth itself should play? We are talking about skilling, for an example. In other words, the youth must participate in preparing itself to participate in the process. But I must say, if you say you are afraid of the tanks and what you call, that is an unfortunate one. That's an unfortunate one. I think there is a process of involving the young people in the participation. In governments, for an example, in organizations, they are participating. Not long time ago, I had a reshuffle of government. I put a lot of young people, particularly implementing that idea. And of course, some people will have different views. That's democracy. But the reality is that we should not just talk about the youth participation. We should involve them. And I've seen them in a number of governments, coming in a number of organizations. I think it's a question of us harmonizing our thinking and therefore making our plans and therefore having programs to implement. Partly is to involve. So once the youth, one or two or more, are put in very serious, responsible positions, they must demonstrate, use their energy, their imagination, and their innovation. They will reach the point. I'm convinced. And if at all there is a problem of governments that are frustrating and making the youth not to participate, I think those matters are important to come. In the recent past, in the AU summit, the youth has been given a space to come and participate. We must hear more of such problems so that we can talk and correct those problems. Because for us to move forward, we need that energy, we need that imagination, and that's why some of us act the way we do, because we are looking forward. We are not looking backwards. And that is beginning to happen. And I would, in fact, love to engage you because I've got my colleagues so that you can indicate which are these countries that are still rolling tanks and soldiers. I'm very keen to know so that we can talk to our brothers who do so. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, just one added note. It's not just the engagement of the young people into society. I think it's also a big challenge for the older generation to act as role models in terms of the values for the young generation. That's the basis for mutual trust.
Professor, I totally agree. That's why I've put young people to show what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I would come back to my three values which I presented. And if you all go out of this room committed to those three values, we will have a great future. I just repeat, respect the individual and global diversity. Serve the society or you belong to and not your self-interests. And finally, act as a trustee for the next generation. Thank you again, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And